welcome to Evenng TV. I'm Evenng Ransom. I wanted to talk about depression, drug use, creativity, and how some of those things play together. I've been working on an article about my son because we're coming up on the anniversary of his death. That was in July. And so I was working on an article that's going to go in a magazine. And the article is going to be about CPTSD. If I were to pick a one thing that I was going to zero in on and say this is my cause, I think that that's what I would say it is. Beyond narcissistic abuse, beyond all of that, I think that the thing that I really feel motivated to focus in on is the CPTSD, because that really ultimately is what it all boils down to, and what cost my son his life, and also what is causing so many things that we're calling something else. No one was talking about that in my son's life. We were talking about heroin addiction. We were talking about all that. And in his case especially, he got clean numerous times. He'd been for 9 months when this happened. So the drug itself, the drug addiction wasn't the factor. It was whatever was compelling him to go back to it. At the time when I'm writing this article, of course, Cornell died. And I'm up here in Seattle area, and this all kind of hits home to me. I didn't know Cornell, but in a way I feel like I did. And in a way, it just all is so close, so close to home. I was born in the same hospital as Kurt Cobain. Possibly I was at Kurt Cobain's birth because my mother was pregnant with me in this tiny hospital, and she was a nurse, right then and there. Very likely that she was there when he was born, and I was in utero. It would have been so easy to have known them, the kind of guys I liked and all that. So it's just kind of, by all rights I should know all these guys. I didn't, but timing just happened to be that I went away to college at the time they were coming up in Seattle. So just time is off. But very much I feel like they are people that I connect with, that I know of, that I feel like they're brothers and sisters of mine. And then to have this child who, we didn't have a musical family. His father is not musical. My son was just the most musical person. No one on either side was a singer, a songwriter, or any of that, and he just had such a gift for it. And from birth, he really had a knack for music, and he had rhythm even as a little baby, and so it was just, and he really was one of these true, like, kind of savant sort of people, where it really was the thing that he had to do. I just couldn't imagine him doing anything else, and really he couldn't do anything else, to be quite honest. With my son, I felt very much like he just had to embrace the artist lifestyle, and he just had to, hopefully get good people around him, because he just was not a practical person. He wasn't a person that, he was just never going to have any kind of regular 9-to-5 job. If the music thing didn't work out, he would probably just be a street bum, and he would probably be fine with that. There was just no way that my son was just not going to have any kind of regular life, a regular job. He was going to be a musician, or he was going to be a musician regardless. So he was going to be a musician regardless, and hopefully he'd find a way to make a living at it, But that's totally the way that I saw it. I was completely excited about it. I thought it was great. He had a real gift, and it was really kind of peaceful in a way to just sort of know that and not have to worry about what, he didn't have to think about what am I going to do. Anyhow, so, it sort of was this thing where I felt like, I come up in the same time, in the same area as that whole thing with all the musicians in the Seattle area. And I wasn't directly a part of it, but then I have this child who is like, it's like he's channeling that period too, because his music was very kind of retro. It sounded a lot like those guys, more in line with that stuff than anything that is newish, So people like Cornell were really heroes of my son, and people that I had introduced him to, and musically I'd introduced him to, and they were really what kept me and my kids really connected. It gave us something to talk about. It gave us something to connect on, because I was a music fan. I was a music fan, and they were musicians, and that was just really cool. And so I was surprised with Chris Cornell's death. I really was, because he seemed kind of like he was the Rock. Being that he was 52, he'd seen a lot of people come and go. And, you know, one of the first was back in 1990 when Andrew Wood, the lead for Mother Love Bone, when he died. You know, that was really, really hard on Chris Cornell. And they put together Temple of the Dog, and they did, you know, tribute albums and tribute songs to him, and, you know, it really clearly impacted him a great deal. I guess I kind of want to pull this together with, there was some stuff with, I don't know how, when Robin Williams died by hanging and Chris Cornell died by hanging, apparently, it seemed like there was a lot of people. I know Richard Brannon made a video about CPTSD and Robin Williams. Someone else did as well. I'm not sure how they connected that. I'm not sure how they knew that was what it was. And no one's ever suggested anything like that here with Chris Cornell. I'm curious though, why not? I mean, I'm curious why a death by hanging did everyone seem to know that with Robin Williams, but not here. But clearly he had anxiety because he was taking Evenng, and it was kind of eerie because my son, when we got all his things back, his wallet, he had some Evenng as well, that he didn't have a prescription for it. It was clearly something he'd gotten from someone. So he was clearly riddled with anxiety. You know, my son was anxious, and he was self-medicating this anxiety, which breaks my heart. You know, it breaks my heart to think that my beautiful boy was, you know, 20 years old at the, you know, just getting started in life, musician. He could perform, he could, on the stage and behind a guitar, behind a microphone. He was dynamic, he was alive, he had courage, he belonged there. It was the rest of the time that he struggled with. Not everybody else. Everybody else loved him. He made friends wherever he went. Everyone just adored him. He didn't know how loved he was or how lovable he was. I keep wanting him to say I don't know why, but I do know why. I know why, because his relationship with his father was so dysfunctional and so painful and so damaging, and he hadn't gotten to a place yet where he had worked through that. He knew there was something wrong in his relationship with his dad, and he still assumed it was him. And I'm not saying that it's even that did him in, but it was the trauma, and he had a lot of trauma triggers and flashbacks and stuff like that. His dad really, really tortured him, really did a number on him, and my other son too, but you know, he really had the trauma bond going with Noah, and it really, really messed him up. But what struck me also about Chris Cornell, and what I kind of wanted to throw out there to all of you, is it's hard no matter who you are. And Chris Cornell, here is someone who had made it through the hard, you know, when you're in your 20s, your late teens and your 20s, those are like a time when your brain, no matter who you are, your brain, it seems, is struggling. Is struggling through some sort of depression, trying to make sense of life. And it seems like that is just a really hard time, no matter who you are. He made it through all that. He made it through all that, even as his friends and colleagues and, you know, are dropping like flies because of drugs. Not him. He made it through all that. He made it through a period that I was getting divorced and I was falling apart. He was getting divorced too. He made it through that. He was a devoted father. He was a really devoted father. This is one thing that really kind of has got me really troubled. He was a really devoted father. Him committing suicide just doesn't seem like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that a father like that would commit suicide. And there's no, according to his wife and friends, no one said that he was talking about suicide. It says in the show that he did, the last show that he did, the last song that he performed was a cover from Led Zeppelin about on flying on the wings to heaven, or something about that. It wasn't his song, but it was definitely a song about dying. And he did say he was saying about how much he loved Detroit and that he felt really sorry for the next city. And no one really knows what he meant by that, but it, you know, they're saying it implies that maybe he knows that they're not going to make it to the next city. It's speculation, but there were a couple of little hints from the show that could imply that he knew he was going to die. But the biggest thing is, why did he have his prescription for Ativan, and why his wife called to see how the show went. Went fine. You're slurring your words. It's because I took an extra Ativan. Then she got worried about it and called the security and said, "Would you please just go check on him again?" None of that would happen with my husband. You know what I mean? Like that scenario, none of that would happen with my husband. He wouldn't be taking Ativan. He wouldn't be overtaking it. I wouldn't have to be having security break in. You know what I mean? It seems like there's something there. There's definitely something there. But all in all, what I just want to say about it is, I just want to say, my heart goes out to Chris Cornell's family and his children and his lovely wife, and being close to someone who has died, and whatever happened here, it was similar to what happened with my son. Let's face it, if my son didn't commit suicide, but he was taking a drug that was deadly, and he already had Hep C. He was killing himself. He knew not to use alone. So in a way he was. He didn't mean to kill himself maybe that night. He was overly confident or something. But, it wasn't like he was being extraordinarily careful. Like, it wasn't like he had this, it wasn't like he was cherishing his life and being really careful with it. That's for certainly sure, And, that drug, Ativan, I don't know how long he'd been taking it or whatever, but it is a drug that definitely can cause you to black out and not know what you're doing. I don't know if you would do something like hang yourself or even attempt to hang yourself if that was just completely not something you'd ever thought of before. That seems unlikely. And the pieces of the puzzle don't really. It sounded like what happened was that he had taken too much of the drug. There was that. He was slurring his words a little bit. There was that. When he was found, he had something around his neck, but he was on the floor actually. So he had apparently maybe attempted to hang himself from something that broke. There was no details about what it was. He's a tall man. He was 6'2", over 6'2", so he was a tall man. And so, what was it that he could have been hanging from? I'm not sure. And what were the red cords that were around his neck? I'm not sure about that either. How well thought out was this plan? Was it a plan? Did he know did he know what he was going to do when he was on the stage, like they're suggesting? Or was he just in some sort of a drug-related blackout and got depressed thinking about something and did something like that accidentally? I don't know if he meant to kill himself. What I do know is that it seems like he and Prince and my son, they have something in common in that they're creative people who were using drugs. The difference is, my son was young and he was using a street drug and he was being reckless. But what's really crazy about both Prince and Chris Cornell is, they'd had long careers around all kinds of drugs, and they could have gone wild in their 20s and 30s and 40s. How is it that something like this happens in their 50s? Alone, when they're alone. It's not, and in Chris's case, he had 3 children that he adored, really adored, and my understanding, the oldest of them is 16. So they were all still in the house and stuff like that too. So, 3 children with 2 different moms. His current wife has 2, and then his former wife had 1. And, he sounded like a really, really good dad, and it doesn't really add up, and it's really, really sad. But the point of it is that life is hard, and we don't know why people we can't judge books by their covers. We can't know Chris Cornell's life is perfect. It looked pretty perfect. It looked pretty great. He was, you know, a very successful man. He'd made a whole career off of his passion and his love. He had a beautiful wife, beautiful children. He'd had a Golden Globe. He had a couple of really big accomplishments with songwriting, solo work songwriting, where he'd gotten his music into feature films, all kinds of accomplishments, and kept managing to sort of reinvent himself. And he had, you know, both Audio Slave and Soundgarden had both been touring recently. He'd, you know, done a lot of solo work recently. You know, just had a lot going on, and you know, was so gifted. And so anyway, I just you don't know, you know, and so, you know, when some of us, you know, I can look at some of the what's going on in my own life. I can look at some of the videos of some of the other people and some of the, you know, terrible, you know, really hard things that have happened. And, you know, I say, you know, props to all of us who keep hanging in there, who keep putting one foot in front of the other one, who find some reason to keep going, who, and it's just, it kind of connects us a little bit to know that we're not doomed because bad things happened, no more than Chris Cornell had a golden ticket, you know? Who knows why, you know, who knows? And now his kids and his wife are going to have to deal with that, the aftermath of that, and the uncertainty of that, because they're never going to know. They're never going to know for sure what happened there. There's a lot of mysteries around that. As far as I know, no ties to any kind of trauma disorders or anything like that. So I'm not sure what the Evenng was all about. I'm not sure why he was treating anxiety. I have no idea. But that would be, you know, that would be an interesting thing that I'm going to pay attention to see if there's a tie there with CPTSD. I have no reason to think that there was, but I am curious why this guy who's been a performer for, you know, 30 years, why he is taking Evenng, an anti-anxiety drug. And apparently it had been a really great show where he was, you know, pretty upbeat. In fact, a writer about the show follows them, said he was actually more upbeat than usual, that usually he can be a little bit somber and brooding, and usually he kind of stares down at his guitar with his hair hanging in his face most of the time, and this time he was very dynamic and sort of effervescent, and so it seemed more upbeat. That was what he was, you know, ready to write his review about the show, and he was, you know, he was going to say that seemed really alive and more alive than usual, and really upbeat. So that's kind of interesting. So, but yeah, we'll never know. We'll never know what the story is. And, you know, there's the flip side. That's the dark side. Here's somebody who looks like they have it all, and this happens. But the same thing is true for all of us, you know. People could look at me and be like, how is she even managing to keep going? And the reason that I managed to keep going is because it's up to me to perceive that something bad happened here. You know, maybe it wasn't bad. Maybe there's some reason for it. Maybe there's something good about it. And maybe something is going to, you know, maybe my son, by my son dying, there is some incredible things that are going to happen. And I can already see some hints at what they might be. And so, you know, that remains to be seen. It just goes to show you that here is someone who had everything, seemingly everything. And also, you know, that, and actually that could be the very thing itself, is sometimes when what you think, if I had that would make me happy. Only if I have that. And so you set that out these goals and these things to strive for, and that keeps you going, right? But what if you got everything and you still felt lost? You still felt like you didn't know who you were. You still felt depressed and sad. And that actually happens. There are a lot of people that you would think would be very, very successful that aren't that happy. And so the point of that is that, you know, you can get happy whatever your circumstances. And this is one thing I learned. I think I learned it to some degree because of growing up in a narcissistic household, was that sometimes when your circumstances in the immediate were not so great, you found a way to get happy regardless of circumstances. And that's a gift. That's a real gift and a blessing that came. It's all back together. It's just, I don't know what happened to Chris Cornell. And my heart goes out to his family. I feel like I lost a brother or something. I feel like he's somebody who, grew up together, and I always kind of watched his career and was always very inspired and proud of him, and was someone that I had shown, because my kids had such poor role models in their lives that I found role models that they could, and mentors that they could have from afar to showcase for them, and he was one. He was definitely one of the people that I held up as a role model for my sons. He wasn't golden any more than we're doomed. Your life is of your making, and self-compassion probably is, an answer that would help us all and would help him. All right, you guys, thanks so much for listening, and I will talk with you real soon. Bye-bye.